And thank you for being here with us again.
Anytime.
So you guys have been around for about 10 years now, right?
10 years in. Yeah, almost 11.
And you've gone through a lot. Just to recap a little bit, you were named Time Magazine's Invention of the Year in 2008. Mm-hmm. In 2013, the FDA told you to discontinue marketing your genetic testing kits. And 2 years later, you received FDA approval to provide customers with some health information.
Right.
So where do things stand today?
So it's been definitely a journey. I don't know how many people are in regulated industries, but it definitely,
that chuckled just now.
Yes, all of you. Definitely, it's a process, and I think what happened for us is that diagnostics, we believed we were a diagnostic, and what happens, the FDA told us that we're actually a medical device, and so we've been going through the process of proving sort of out the efficacy of the test and the safety element, and that consumers, all of you in the room, are in fact quite capable of actually getting information about yourselves, and what are you going to do with it? And for me, more than almost like what 23andMe is doing, I see ourselves as actually the leader of the consumer health movement. And that more and more, I lived in Poland in 1993, and I was always fascinated by communism. And there's moments in time where I actually start to realize, like, we're kind of communist patients. We kind of are used to actually looking at our doctor and saying, like, oh, you tell us what to do, and other people should make decisions. And part of what the drive of 23andMe is actually to say, no, you're actually in charge of yourself. And not only your DNA, and you should be empowered to actually know this information, but you should actually be in charge of all of your health information. And we shouldn't teach you like you're incapable of knowing it, but we should actually teach you like you actually can learn about yourself, and then you can make decisions, and that this should be more of a joint decision process. So we're still evolving, and obviously one of the big things, which is obviously probably a theme for everyone here, is the transition to the new government.
Okay, well, let's touch on that since you brought it up. You're a scientist. Mm-hmm. You studied biology, right?
Correct.
So we just elected a president who has said many things, especially on Twitter, and some of these are tweets, but I just went through and highlighted a few to remind you. These are some statements that he has made. So the concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese in order to make U.S. manufacturing non-competitive. Stop. Ice storm rolls from Texas to Tennessee. I'm in Los Angeles, and it's freezing. Global warming is a total and very expensive hoax! ! Healthy young child goes to doctor, gets pumped with massive shot of many vaccines, doesn't feel good, and changes. Autism, in all caps, many such cases. And lastly, remember, new environmentally friendly light bulbs can cause cancer. Be careful. The idiots who came up with this stuff don't care. I don't know why I put that one in.
Wow.
But,
okay. I missed that one.
I just thought it was interesting. So in all seriousness, what do the next 4, possibly 8 years mean from your perspective when it comes to science?
So I think it's two elements. And it's obviously, like, I was publicly out there. I was a Hillary supporter. I'm obviously a big believer in science and a lot of her policies. So the transition has been, it's a real shock for us. At the same time, we were really regulated in the last administration. And I do think that this changes. Like, there's certain types of regulations that have already been sort of announced that they're not going to move forward with. So it's quite likely this is much better for 23andMe.
So what kind of regulations?
So there was a guidance, for instance, called laboratory developed tests, where they wanted to move labs over into being regulated like 23andMe as a medical device, and that is not going forward right now. Mm-hmm. So there's a bunch of regulations. I think you can look at, the tweet I looked at from Trump was, for every new regulation, 2 have to go away. So without a doubt, even I think
I didn't have that one in my
You did?
Sorry.
Oh. There's a lot that is actually going to change in terms of like enabling more people to actually just start to make decisions and having less regulation there. But without a doubt, we're obviously big believers in science and data. And I think that my hope would be is that 23andMe, by being less regulated and enabling more and more people to actually learn about genetics and learn about themselves, that they actually open their eyes more and more to science. And so I'm a huge believer in education, and I think that the more also education gets empowered and almost decentralized down to individuals, and I look at all of us in the room as being leaders, is it's all of our responsibility to actually be educating. And so for 23andMe, education is a huge priority for us from K through 12 and through medical school even, is making sure that people understand the basics. And I think that a lot of these things, like you talk about global warming and whatnot, like how much do people, are they actually understanding the science? And can we actually start at an even earlier stage and get people believing that they are scientists? And I think scientists did a real disservice by wearing the white coat and putting up this image of like, oh, I'm the scientist, I have a PhD and I wear a coat, and therefore, and they use big words and you can't understand it. And I think that that is actually a huge disservice to all of the, middle of America, essentially, like the Trump world, where they're saying like, oh, there's all these big words, we don't get this. Like, we actually need to empower them that anyone of any education level can actually understand this. So I think it's going to really change, and I'm hoping that we can actually flip it as a positive, and that we can at least say from a genetics perspective and in the sense of empowerment that we're giving people more education and teaching them to learn about themselves and what does this actually really mean.
So it's interesting, you brought up less regulation in the current administration when it comes to some of the stuff that you've had to deal with and been blocked by. And of course you're for that because you want your product out in the hands of consumers and that information out there. But at the same time, you guys recently decided to stop a next generation sequencing product, and it's not every day that a company in Silicon Valley decides not to put out there a product that is going to be faster and give you, and do more, right? It's always the opposite. So can you explain that decision?
I think in part, that decision, like I think a company, we're doing our company values, for instance, right now. And I think as we've looked at all these other companies, and a lot of the successful ones in Silicon Valley say, do one thing and do it really well. And what 23andMe is really about is almost like an entry point into genetics. And I think what we learned is that there's a whole super complicated world when you get into the more diagnostic level of sequencing. And I think that's where like color genomics, which is here, like that's a different type of experience than what we're doing. Like we give you a very broad education. Like most people come to us and they don't know what the 23 and 23andMe means. And we have to explain what is DNA, what's a chromosome, what do genes do, why are we different? That, I've had to tell certain people that like, there was this movement in the UK for a while saying we don't want to eat food with DNA, and I was like, well, that's really hard. So you realize like there's this education level that you need to we need to empower people just to understand the basics, and I think that people are still scared. Like people think as much as they use DNA and genetics in their normal vernacular, people don't understand what it means and they're scared of it. So I think that we can help de-risk it and get people excited and understanding that we're actually all related to each other, and that you can learn about some things, like we have a saturated fat report, and how some people are potentially more likely to be heavier when they're eating a lot of saturated fat, and some people are more likely to not be. So we have that kind of information, and we can help people understand when might you actually want to have a more in-depth test, and then it's a totally different type of experience to go and actually have a diagnostic in that capacity.
So you mentioned color genomics. Katie, are you in the room, by the way? Raise your hand. We're going to go to you soon for a question. Just so that you're preparing yourself, but there are other companies out there. I mean, there's a company, Habit, that's coming out soon, where they basically come up with a diet for you based on your DNA. I need something for my cough, by the way, if you can. And there are others, right? So I'm assuming you don't want a Wild West out there. I mean, you talked about the importance of education.
Right.
What would you, if you're the FDA.
Right, so I would say like our thoughts on the FDA was actually like, it's not that there shouldn't be regulation. I should make it all clear. Like I'm all for it because there are bad actors out there. And I think when we first started, I went to this woman who actually told me that if I took these vitamins, I could change my DNA. And I was like, really? Like, can you explain? Like, how do the vitamins change your DNA? And she kept telling me that there was research out there, et cetera. So without a doubt, we believe that there should be some kind of regulation, and that there actually needs to be, there needs to be some kind of oversight of this. But for instance, in the UK and in Canada, we actually have all our reports back out there, and we have CE mark approval, and there is a process that you can go through that's just not quite as restrictive. And I think that's actually one of the things that we advocate for regulation, but potentially more and more of a systematic way to look at it. And we've always said that we're a little bit of a square peg in a round hole. That is just that the system, we're willing to sort of comply, but that the system that we're trying to comply with isn't meant to have this kind of scale. So I do worry about, there is a world out there where people want to promise and say, oh, let me look at your DNA and then I'll tell you exactly how to exercise and I'll tell you exactly what to eat. And we reiterate over and over again that 23andMe is a science-led company. Like, there's all kinds of things that you can look at. Like, there's bad research all out there, and that you could potentially tell people things. But we're a science-led company, and we have to have some kind of standards. And so we want to make sure that people understand, and believe in the information that we're giving back, and that there's scientific rigor to that. So I'm super eager to see how Habit and other companies do. I haven't looked at the science behind it and what they're doing, but I do think that becomes part of that concern, is that you want to make sure that people actually have some faith and that they trust the information that they're using. And I have seen just how much I tell someone their ancestry and how much that can actually change their lives. So there is a real meaningful impact. And part of by having a relationship with customers is you resonate on a daily basis just how much you actually are impacting people's lives.
Yeah. Katie, question or comment? Can you introduce yourself, even though I already did?
Hi, I'm Katie Stanton. I'm the CMO of Color Genomics, and there's nothing like being called on in a Fortune MPW class sitting in the back. Like, good thing I was paying attention. I'm a huge fan of Anne's. She has really paved the way, I think, for a lot of science-based innovations, and at a time when it was really, really hard. And the demystification of genetic testing is really amazing and empowering, not just for business, but for humanity. So my question is, you've been at this for about 10 years now, and you guys have sequenced millions of people's DNA. What are some of the most interesting observations or outputs that you guys have observed that can help improve people's lives?
I think there's two. So I think first and foremost there's one, and I think I alluded to this in the beginning when I was talking, is that people really thrive when they actually are empowered. And I think all of you who have children probably see this. Like, the moment your children actually start to taste independence and what it's like to make a decision for themselves, it's hard to ever turn that off. And to me, it's the same type of thing. Like, people suddenly see, like we're all given the same generic advice, like eat well, don't smoke, exercise. But the moment people see something like, oh, like, this is actually why I actually have a harder time losing weight, or, oh, this is actually why, like, I'm at higher risk for melanoma. Like, it's eye-opening. And for them, the idea that they're suddenly empowered and that they can learn things about themselves and they can actually, like, that they've been empowered, they've been trusted. Like, wow, like, you can understand DNA and you can understand things about yourself. And then these are actually lifestyle decisions. Like, prevention is not a moneymaker in the traditional healthcare system, but these are lifestyle decisions. And that you can then walk into Target or Walmart and say, like, hey, I'm going to start working out, or I'm going to make a change in my diet. And it's so empowering for people. And there's been studies that have come out about how, roughly 40-50% of our customers, they learn something and they want to make a lifestyle change. And so it just shows, like, so many people want to actually be empowered and do something. And I love that. And that's why I'm hugely inspired and supportive of this entire consumer health world. More companies that are helping all of us be independent of actually sort of the professional system that is otherwise making decisions for us.
So we unfortunately need to wrap up because we've got a concert to put on, but just real fast. What's the most important piece of information that you've learned about yourself through your DNA?
I'd say, so I punt this as like a family thing, is that Sergey, my ex, who found out that he was high risk for Parkinson's disease, and it really had a transformative impact on the family in the capacity that we understand why his mother has the Parkinson's and potentially his aunt and uncle, and that Sergey is at higher risk, and that, for a reason, like, we donate a ton of money every year to Michael J. Fox Foundation. We're really involved in the research. You can start to be aware. He started exercising and eating more. And I think that when you find out something that's really meaningful in the family, in some ways the whole family bonds around it, and you actually say, like, you don't live by it every single day, but you say, you know what, I need to actually be proactive in the choices I'm making.